This is CBC Vancouver News.
Here I am instead, sending you off to a different kind of paradise.
Rick was so proud to be a police officer.
Loving husband, colleague, and practical joker. Family and first responders from across Canada remember a BC Mountie killed in the line of duty.
The grief is still there, the wounds are still fresh, and I don't know if I'll ever get over it.
Remembering sisters, mothers, aunts, nieces, and friends. People gather on the National Day of Action for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
The system was good at a particular point in time, but it's not really fit for purpose anymore.
And BC's ombudsperson says people forced to flee natural disasters need better support. Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. He loved jokes, sports, his big family, and his job. And thousands of fellow first responders gathered in Langley today to remember and honor RCMP Constable Rick O'Brien.
He was full of life and full of laughter. I feel honored to have known Rick. And I can honestly say there will never be another person quite like my friend.
O'Brien was on the force for 7 years and valued the time he spent in his community. He was shot and killed last month while executing a search warrant.
Rick loved to attend schools any chance that he got, and he cherished all the positive interactions that he had with youth.
O'Brien was 51 years old. He's survived by his wife, Nicole, and their 6 children, Cindy, Taylor, Chelsea, Isaac, Braden, and Bryce. The CBC's Liam Britton was at the service and joins us now. Liam, many emotions there.
Yeah, that's right, Dan. And from many different first responders across Canada, Washington State, and Oregon. I saw police myself from Langley, Vancouver, Abbotsford, New Westminster, Surrey, Delta, Saanich, even state troopers from the U.S., firefighters, paramedics, Canadian Forces personnel, and corrections officers. Thousands of them marched in support of O'Brien's family to the Langley Event Centre for his regimental funeral. O'Brien's sister prompted laughter as she remembered her brother's love of jokes, and a longtime friend of O'Brien's wife, Nicole, spoke on her behalf.
Where do I even begin? The night before, we were so excited, talking about this very day, the day where we were jumping on an airplane to paradise for 11 days. 11 days of just being together. No work, no distractions, no kids, just us. And here I am instead, sending you off to a different kind of paradise.
And people outside the service also stopped to honor O'Brien as his procession moved past. Several dozen wore red to honor him, some of them the mothers of Mounties.
Well, stunned and distraught, and just it's not something we dwell on as families, but it hits very close to home when it happens.
Now, as you mentioned, Constable O'Brien was shot and killed executing a search warrant in Coquitlam in September. Prosecutors have charged 25-year-old Nicholas Bellamar with first-degree murder and attempted murder with a firearm. None of the allegations have been tested in court yet. Online court records show his next appearance is November 7th. Today, though, was about remembering Constable Rick O'Brien and the family, friends, and colleagues he leaves behind. Dan?
Liam Britton, thank you. It was a solemn gathering in Vancouver tonight as loved ones attended a vigil for missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, trans, and Two-Spirit people.
Remember me, when the sun comes up in the morning sky, there I will be, so high.
The event gave space for grieving family members to share stories of their loved ones and friends who are no longer here.
Grief is still there, the wounds are still fresh, and I don't know if I'll ever get over it.
Our sisters who don't get a chance to be here physically on earth with us. Just remembering how much love we have for them and how much love they have for us. And
It comes the same day Statistics Canada released a report showing the disparities that persist in how the justice system handles cases involving Indigenous women and girls. New data between 2009 and 2021 shows Indigenous women and girls were killed at a rate 6 times higher than that of women and girls who are non-Indigenous. The Stats Canada report also says that killings of Indigenous women and girls are less likely to result in the most serious murder charges. The Vancouver Area Network of Drug Users is speaking out against new provincial laws that will ban drug use in more public spaces. Some drug advocates say that will increase stigma. But as Yasmin Khaneo reports, provincial officials say they want to keep communities safe.
Your family people, do you love your kids?
Yes.
Of course. Do we love all kids and families?
Yes.
The Vancouver Network of Drug Users protesting concerns about prohibiting public drug use at a park near a playground where drug use is banned.
Most of us are homeless. If we don't have a place to go, we're forced to be outside, and most times, unfortunately, we're forced to go to secluded places.
The provincial government says it will soon introduce legislation to further regulate public drug use.
So decriminalization does not mean using, for example, near a playground or in the front of a store or the doorway of a store.
In September, the BC government received approval from Ottawa to ban the possession of illegal drugs within 15 meters of playgrounds, spray pools, wading pools, and skate parks for the duration of the decriminalization pilot project scheduled to last until 2026. The move came after a number of BC municipalities expressed safety concerns.
I don't want to see or hear of a young kid picking up a syringe or a pipe, or having to even see that. But also on the other flip side of it is that we have to give people places to go as well so they can consume their substances if they don't have a home.
Drug user advocates say more overdose prevention sites are needed across BC, especially in smaller communities. The health minister says he can't speak about the specifics of the coming legislation.
What I can say generally is that what we need to do is to ensure that that we keep people safe, that we keep people alive, that we expand treatment. We're doing that. That we ensure it, but we also ensure that communities are safe.
It's unclear what exactly the legislation will be about or when it will be tabled. But what is clear is the difficulty balancing public safety and public health. Yasmin Khaneo, CBC News, Vancouver.
In Victoria, a stabbing today marked the third violent attack in the same area in the past 3 weeks. A local outreach group says many of the city's most vulnerable people are in survival mode.
They're just trying to get through every day, and a lot of times that can be territory, people moving in on a place that you feel comfortable in. So sometimes acts of violence are just acts of survival.
In mid-September, this man was killed on Pandora Avenue. Then last week, just a few blocks away, a 70-year-old man was assaulted. The victim in this morning's stabbing on Pandora was sent to hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. Police say the recent violence is not unusual for the area.
Obviously, these incidents are troubling, particularly the vicious assault on a 70-year-old man, on a senior citizen, that by all accounts appears to be unprovoked. But there is crime and violence that occurs in that area.
While they don't have statistics pointing to an uptick in violence, officers say they do believe a lot of the crime that happens along Pandora is never reported. There's a lot of news to share in Vancouver's housing market, with both monthly real estate stats coming out and City Council making some changes to its rental policies. Here to break it down for us is our Justin McElroy. Justin, monthly real estate numbers rarely bring good news in terms of affordability. How is today different?
Yeah, well, it depends on your perspective, Dan. People might remember that last month it was announced that the region set an all-time record for the average selling price for a detached home at $2.4 million. Well, today we got the numbers for September, and that number is actually down all the way to $2.2 million. So again, that's a big dip in terms of the average percentage over the last month, about 7% or so. Now, that could be because some higher-end homes didn't sell this month compared to last, but you can see over the last couple years, pretty bumpy with the interest rate hikes that the Government of Canada has put in, meaning possibly that we aren't seeing the quite increases that we saw in 2020 and 2021 when it comes to detached homes, townhomes, and condos, but still not seeing an actual decrease that's significant in selling prices that for most people would mean affordability in the greater Vancouver region. So 2.4 million all the way down to 2.2 million over the last month, depending on your perspective, could be good news, could be not a heck of a lot of news at all.
So that is home ownership, but when it comes to rentals, the city of Vancouver has made some changes. What about those?
Yeah, and this has been talked about a lot over the last few days. The city of Vancouver, for the past 7 years, has had this moderate income rental pilot program where basically they've given developers the option of, in return for not having to pay the types of fees that they normally do on projects, they have to make 20% of their units in a building on deeply affordable rentals, at least compared to what CMHC data is. Well, today, they voted to increase those fees, and the reason why is, frankly, the program wasn't working. If you take a look at this chart, the city had gotten 60 inquiries about possible projects under the pilot program, but only 16 of them had been approved by staff. Only 9 of them are under construction, and a grand total of 0. 6 years in have actually been built in the city of Vancouver. So again, lots of municipalities trying lots of different things to try and incentivize developers to build units that are much cheaper than the market rents on there right now. But it's still very difficult to find any sort of calculation with the amount of money that governments are putting into housing right now that will make those new rental units what people might consider affordable or not.
Justin, thanks very much.
Thanks, Dan.
BC's ombudsperson says it is time to rethink how we support people fleeing climate disasters. He's released a report on the government's response to the wildfires and severe flooding in 2021. And he calls disaster response that year outdated and inaccessible.
What we're seeing is that displacement is much broader, way more people, and for far, far longer. Some 90% of the people who were displaced in 2021 needed support for more than 72 hours. So the system was good at a particular point in time, but it's not really fit for purpose anymore.
Now, there's a chance to revisit that system before the next emergency, as there are no longer any wildfires of note in our province. And the status of several fires in the Vanderhoof and Fort St. James areas have been downgraded. A wildfire of note is said to be highly visible and pose a potential threat to public safety. The BC Wildfire Service says recent weather has helped.
We have been seeing the number of new starts, active wildfires, as well as wildfires classified as out of control, continue to decline. And that's thanks in part to the cooler, more fall-like weather, as well as those effective suppression efforts.
334 active wildfires are still burning in BC. 50 are considered out of control. Now, people who live in the rural parts of the Capital Regional District on Vancouver Island can now look at new maps which chart wildfire risk linked to vegetation. The maps are a part of a project created by the CRD and Islands Trust aimed at preventing fires in Juan de Fuca, Salt Spring Island, and other southern Gulf Islands, areas with fire-prone vegetation.
You know, looking at the maps, it's quite astounding how much of our electoral areas are at risk of, potentially at risk of wildfire.
Brent adds landowners on the island ought to take action if they find they're in a high exposure area. They can follow fire smart recommendations and have an emergency plan ready. For the third year in a row, the Stanley Park Ghost Train is going to stay in the shed. The Vancouver Park Board says the train is still experiencing mechanical issues. They say the vintage train needs specialized parts that are hard to get. They do have the parts they need, though, and they hope to have the train repaired by next month. The Halloween train was first canceled in 2020 because of the pandemic. In 2021, it was shut down over coyote concerns. And last year, the train was confirmed to hit the tracks, but scrubbed again a few weeks later. Ronald McDonald House is a home away from home for many families facing medical crises. The charity is now celebrating 40 years here in BC. And for families not just beyond a place to stay under one roof, it's a place to heal.
2, 3, 4. We did it! Today is the 40th anniversary of Ronald McDonald House in British Columbia, and the original house served 13 families at a time, and in 2014 we opened the current house, which serves 73 families at a time.
Gabby was diagnosed when she was 4 with a brainstem tumor.
Yeah, it's grown recently again, so we're back to try and nip it in the bud again. We're pretty familiar with the place. This round of treatment, we have been here for a month and a half.
Ronald McDonald House is a home where families stay when their child is seriously ill and the families have to travel from somewhere in British Columbia or Yukon and stay for treatment at BC Children's Hospital.
It just feels like home. You meet other families that are going through things. Just makes you feel like you're not alone.
It's nice not to have to go back down and then come back up for every appointment that I have.
This place has been a godsend for us for the entire time that we've been here. It's just made it easy to come and just focus on the journey with Gabby.
It's been pretty good. I've made a lot of friends, which I like about that.
We're planning a new house to ensure that we can serve more families. The new facility is likely to cost about $100 million, and we're going to raise those funds and get the house built as soon as we can.
Bringing families together for the past 40 years, and hopefully we can keep bringing families together.
Like, keep it going.
Keep it going.
After the break, more on the regimental funeral for Constable Rick O'Brien. Stay with us. Hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream. Thanks for being here. In Toronto, the Paramedics Union is again sounding the alarm about a shortage of ambulances. On Monday, they declared a code red. That means all ambulances were tied up for a period of time. And as Ellie Chiasson shows us, paramedics from other municipalities had to be called in to help.
The Paramedics Union declares a code red when there's a shortage of ambulances. For several hours on Monday, they were all tied up.
It's bad out there on a daily basis. The other day wasn't really an anomaly, except for the fact that the service has never got to the point where they've had to basically beg their neighbors for help.
It's the first time paramedic union leader Mike Merriman has seen it in 32 years. He says about 50 911 calls were waiting in a queue that Toronto paramedics would not be able to get to.
The one that comes to mind when I heard about from one of our crews was a woman in her 80s who fell and looks like fractured her arm, and she was waiting on the ground for hours before a unit could get there, that's not acceptable. It's obviously that, to me, it's the service has reached a tipping point.
Although it happened on a busy night, Merriman says Toronto should have had enough medics to respond. Instead, they had to ask York Region to send ambulances, something the city says is routine. In order to help ensure the most effective response to high-priority patients, there are no borders for ambulances. The closest ambulance is always chosen to respond to high-priority calls, regardless of location. They say one of the more pressing issues is at the hospital level, concerning ambulance drop-offs where paramedics are tied up in patient care at emergency rooms.
I'm not denying that's not the case. That does happen, but it wasn't the case the other day. The hospitals were doing much better.
Merriman says staff retention is the most pressing issue facing EMS. Increased pressures of the cost of living and other jurisdictions offering higher salaries.
Toronto services 20% of the calls for the entire province, but has 10% of the staff. So that should give you some indication of the workload that Toronto paramedics have.
Pressure that will only increase as demand increases heading into flu and COVID season. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Back to our top story now. Thousands of first responders from across Canada and the U.S. took part in a regimental procession and funeral for RCMP Constable Rick OBrien today. He was shot and killed last month while executing a drug-related search warrant in Coquitlam. Here are some more highlights from his service.
We are here today to honor our fallen hero, Constable Rick OBrien of Ridge Meadows Detachment, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and to recognize the ultimate sacrifice he has made in the line of duty to keep our communities safe.
The world has changed with this loss. We can't say enough, but we want to say, well done, Rick. We love you.
I wish I could have done more to help. We're also very proud of you. We love you, and you will be missed.
I feel honored to have known Rick. And I can honestly say there will never be another person quite like my friend.
Rick loved to give hugs, a gift that he inherited from my mom. Rick's oldest daughter, Cindy, would like for all of you to know that every time she had a school play, Rick was there. He would watch with pride, and then he'd be the first to present her with a bouquet of roses and a big hug.
How do I ever imagine life without you? When our whole life was planned around being together and watching the kids grow up, we really did fit a lifetime of adventures into the last 11 and a half years. My very favorite thing about you is loving you and the way you love me back. The love we shared will be the one thing I will cherish the most. A once-in-a-lifetime kind of love, a storybook love, a love that we both never knew existed.
This was the Nanaimo Harbor at sunset, courtesy of Check News. Slight rainbow in the background. We're into fall, but our forecast is looking positively summery across parts of BC. Darius will have your BC-wide weather forecast after this, and we're going to let you know about some changes to our newscast. Stick around.
The Abbotsford Air Show. Okay, I'm a little bit obsessed. Growing up down the street, I have so many memories of the snowbirds flying in perfect formation, the ridiculously loud CF-18 going right overhead, and of course the oh-so-brave Skyhawks, Canada's parachute demonstration team, thrilling audiences by jumping out of planes, and today I am going to do just that. So what did I get myself into today?
Today we're going to be boarding this aircraft over here, climbing up all the way to about 12,500 feet. I have a harness on myself, a huge parachute. We'll be strapped in together, and then this is going to open. You're going to be jumping.
Let's do this.
How was that?
That was the most incredible thing I've ever done in my life.
Are you going to do it again?
I might have to.
All right.
Thank you. That was amazing.
No problem. Our pleasure. I turned around with Mount Baker behind some nice shot of Mount Baker.
Mount Baker was beautiful. That was so amazing. Thank you.
How you liked it?
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. On October 20th, join CBC Vancouver's Leanne Young at the Big Sisters Soiree Gala, an evening for the community to come together celebrating mentorship and resilience of youth. And the Chutzpah Festival returns November 2nd to 23rd with an exciting lineup of performances including dance, music, theater, and more. Festival tickets at chutzpahfestival.com.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Darius Madavi is here with our BC-wide weather forecast, and it's still almost like it's summer coming up.
It is. We got some very warm temperatures coming up for this time of year. We're talking 5-6 degrees above seasonal for most of the province. Further north, even a little bit more. So this is where we'd usually be this time of year. I want to emphasize this is based on satellite imagery, so it might be a little bit different than what you'd see on Environment Canada, but pretty good proxy. So this is around where we'd be this time of year. And you can see right now we're sitting pretty similar, coming up a little bit on parts of the coast. So especially further inland and even Victoria looking quite a bit warmer than we'd usually be already. That sort of warming is going to spread to more of the province by Friday. So we see much of the northern parts of the province start to come up. And by Saturday, we have what will probably be our peak for most of BC, although some places might see that warmth and lack of rain continue into Sunday as well. So expect some probably a last burst of summer, little fall heat wave over the next few days. In terms of our precipitation, we do get some more rain, just scattered showers, probably making their way from the coast into parts of central BC. And you can see a bit of snow making its way up further north. Now, this will be just a one-day burst of snow because temperatures are coming up. So if you look over the next 24 hours, no more snow being added, just a little bit more rain in the northeast. So expect really a warming and drying trend, as Dan said, across the province. Luckily, usually when I give this kind of forecast over the last few months, I've had to say, maybe you'll enjoy it if you're going to be getting outside, but not great in terms of wildfires. But today, I don't have to give so much of a warning because we have no more wildfires of note across the province. Still some out of control, especially up north and parts of central BC, but no wildfires of note. So a little bit of good news there. Tomorrow, just expect plenty of sunny skies. Most of this cloud will start to clear up as we get into the early to late afternoon, depending on where in the province you are. So that's a bit of expect some more sun. Really just this rain is happening on the coast, and you can see some flurries for Dease Lake as well. That's what we saw when we saw that accumulation map. And here in Vancouver, we've got that sunshine. We've got temperatures coming up, so expect the peak probably here coming on Saturday, and then we start to cool off a bit on Sunday, and then maybe some rain for Thanksgiving Monday, but that remains to be seen.
Okay, thanks very much, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
That is your late news for Wednesday. Thank you for joining us tonight. Before we go, we wanted to share some changes to this newscast with you. As you may know, our 6 o'clock news host, Anita Bath, is heading off on another awesome adventure in parenthood, and we wish her and her family love and health and happiness. Starting tomorrow and for the next little while, I will be hosting our 6 o'clock news. I hope you can join us then, and also here at 11 for your local news anchored by our great colleagues and journalists here at CBC. For news anytime, check our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That starts tomorrow morning at 5:30. Good night.